This is the Porsche Experience Center in Atlanta, Georgia, which might as well be called the Wet Dream Experience Center. As I excitedly got out of my Uber and faced the front entrance of the building, I took a slight glance to the left before walking in, and that's where the wet dream started, literally 2 seconds into the experience. There sits a 911 Dakar with this beautiful minty green color, and I was already drooling. After gawking at the Dakar for about 5 minutes, my friend and I made our way inside the front doors, and then boom, even wetter dream. There's an absolutely stunning 918 just sitting there. You can get as close as you wanted to this thing too. And fun fact, this specific 918 is production number 000, the first production prototype of the 918. Pretty sick. This car just traps you there. It literally feels disrespectful to turn your back to it or just walk past. It requires you to just stare at it. However, after 10 minutes of staring and a couple hours until we went on track to drive, we decided to check out the rest of the facility. We checked out the store, which had some predictably overpriced Porsche merchandise, but 2 minutes later we were back at the 918 again. Just as the 918 started to make us both horny, we respectfully said our goodbye and went to grab some food at the cafe, which actually had some pretty great options. On the way to the cafe, you pass this super cool display on the left wall, which shows pretty much every Porsche model ever, both for production cars and race cars, ordered chronologically. It's actually really cool and definitely a nice detail. Once we had our food, we made our way to the balcony that overlooks the test tracks. Sitting down and eating while listening to 911's fly past is a pretty spectacular experience. Once we took a look at the track, we could see the autocross section, a launch control section, a big pad for drifting, and most famously the kick plate, which snaps your car into oversteer for you to control the slide. At this point, we were just about to drop dead. I mean, being surrounded by screaming 911s flying past every 10 seconds was surreal. After about half an hour outside in the Atlanta heat, we went back inside to check out the museum, and of course spent another 10 minutes letting the 918 get us hot and bothered. Down the stairs and into the museum, I just about shit my pants. From my understanding, they have rotating exhibits in this museum, so these cars aren't always here. We definitely lucked out with this exhibit. The first thing we saw was this absolutely ferocious 1982 924, which won the GTO category at Le Mans. I've always loved 944s, 968s, and 924s, so seeing this wide-body race spec was absolutely sick. Everything about this car just looks mean. This one definitely impressed me straight off the bat. However, following this 924 is a 2022 911 GT3R, which won the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and this thing is literally picked straight from the race and dropped here. The tires are melted, there's dead bugs all over it, there's brake dust in the wheels. I mean, this thing is straight from the race. Seeing this after playing games like Assetto Corsa Competizione is so sick. After 5 minutes staring at the GT3, we moved on to the next car, which was this 962C for midgets, and then a real 962C. This was absolutely breathtaking. I'm not as into this category of racing, but seeing this in real life was absolutely insane. Just the size of this thing alone is enough to make you scared to drive it. Onto the other side, they had a 1993 911 RS America in this stunning yellow, but that was nothing compared to the next cars. In the designated wet dream zone, they had a beautifully spec'd GT3 RS, but it's hard to focus on that when the car next to it is a Carrera GT, of course in the iconic silver. I've never seen one of these in real life, and I felt like I was going to explode. The CGT is a total legend, and it had a similar effect to the 918. I just felt like I was required to stare at it without even blinking. Next, we had two Carrera Cabriolets, one from '86 and the other from '89. These two were also amazing to look at, but to be honest, next to a Carrera GT, it's hard to take them as seriously. As we were leaving, we realized there's a downstairs section, so we checked it out. I'm very glad we did. The first thing we saw was this beautiful 1977 935, and I'm actually unsure of what races this car competed in, but seeing a slant-nose 935 in real life was just enough to make me cry. Next to the 935 was a 919 hybrid, and that was just it. I couldn't even really believe, there's absolutely no way they have a 919 hybrid here. It turns out, yeah, I was right, this is just a fiberglass replica, but still pretty sick to see a one-to-one exact copy of this car, given just how insane it is. Lastly, there's a Porsche 9DP, their last entry into open-wheel racing and IndyCar. I didn't actually know Porsche had entries into IndyCar until I saw this, so that was pretty cool. Anyway, that was the museum. On the way out, we stopped by each of these cars for about 5 minutes, and I literally just drooled over them. For me, it was the first time seeing most of these cars, and I couldn't just walk away. I had to pay my respects. Anyway, on the way back up to the lobby, you can look into the Performance Center garage, which is a really nice detail because you can see them doing maintenance on all the cars. Back in the lobby now, you guessed it, we gawked at the 918 for another 15 minutes. Now, hiding our erections, we made our way to the front desk to check in and get a buzzer. Very soon after our buzzer went off, we met our coaches. Unfortunately for YouTube's sake, they're very strict about their no filming policy once you get to the driving experience, because understandably they don't want the driver more focused on how they look in the video, losing focus and then killing multiple people. Probably bad publicity. So I had to put my phone back in my pocket and we got into the cars. By the way, the POV footage of the track is taken from The Topher on YouTube. I emailed Porsche ahead of time and played the YouTube channel card hoping I could film my laps, and I guess I wasn't famous enough because they said no. Anyway, we both drove the 2024 Carrera GTS, which has a turbocharged 3-liter flat 6 producing just under 500 horsepower. The track itself has elements of world-famous tracks scaled down to fit a narrower space, including the corkscrew from Laguna Seca, the carousel from the Nordschleife, the S's from Virginia International Raceway, and more. Once on track, I took a slow lap to get used to the car, and once you're around the final hairpin, I was on it. At first, the coach has to fill you out to make sure you aren't a complete lunatic, so they're more vocal about how you should be controlling the car. However, after about 10 laps on the 1-mile circuit, and me telling him I'm an extremely successful sim racing YouTuber, he loosened up and let me go crazy. One thing I noticed straight away is the G-forces you pull on the carousel. Even taking it at about 60 miles an hour, you can feel super lightheaded as the centrifugal force pushes the car into the track. At first I thought like, oh shit, I feel like I'm gonna pass out, I don't really know if I could do this. But lap after lap I got more used to it, and it ended up being totally fine. As we hit the 15 lap mark, I was already feeling really comfortable with the car, and I probably did about 50 laps on the track in total, taking breaks every so often to do things like launch control exercises and oversteer control, but my coach could tell I was all about lapping as fast as I could. Again, I wish I had my own footage to show you guys, but there were multiple things that I took away from this experience. Porsche, being mostly rear-engine cars, definitely require a unique driving style. A lot of the times when you approach the crest of a hill, you had to slightly brush the brakes to shift the weight to the front wheels in order to give them more contact with the track. If you don't, you lose front end grip and it can feel really light when turning. This was definitely something I had to get used to, as I couldn't rely solely on lifting the throttle to get through a high-speed corner. Another thing I noticed is how insane the brakes are. When lapping the track, my braking was probably the worst aspect of my laps, so my coach took me to the launch control section. After blitzing off the line and hitting about 80 miles an hour in like 3.5 seconds, I would slam the brakes and the car would stop even faster than it could accelerate. I mean, these things have massive brakes, but him taking me to the launch control section really allowed me to trust the brakes more and therefore brake better on a lot of my laps. Also, the GTS was absolutely on it in the corners. I have never experienced such precision and accuracy with steering. I mean, it was indescribable. This 90-degree left is literally no problem for the Porsche. I mean, you turn the wheel and boom, you're on the inside curb with literally zero understeer. This is definitely due to the rear-engine nature of the car and the track being purpose-built to showcase how good a Porsche can be, but nonetheless, it is insanely impressive. Another thing was the acceleration out of corners. As soon as you're on the gas, you feel the rear end squat and just rip out of the corner. This car was seriously responsive, and the fact that it's not even the top model of the 911 is insane. Speaking of which, there were about 15 other cars on the track, and the later we got into our session, the more I would see GT3s and GT3 RSs. Let me tell you guys, and girl, maybe there's one of you watching, but money does not buy skill. I mean, I was passing these GT3 RSs left and right. At one point, I was full throttle going down the Laguna Seca style corkscrew, and my coach told me, listen, you don't need to keep up with these RSs in front of you. Sensing that he might be a little bit nervous I would bin it into the wall, I backed off about 10%, but in the next 3 corners, I passed the RS. In fact, my friend had the same experience the entire day. Neither of us got passed once, and we were the fastest 2 on track, which was honestly a great feeling. So after my hour and a half in the driver's seat was up, my instructor took the wheel to show me how the car can really be driven. As soon as he started driving, he was like, holy shit dude, these tires are completely melted. My front tires started around 32 psi and ended at about 45. I mean, I was driving the shit out of the car. Anyway, the instructor absolutely dominated this track. I mean, he was really on it. However, the only thing that stuck out to me is that through some sections, he was just as fast as I was. Obviously, he had a much faster lap time than me, but through the 2 sections of S's, the carousel, the wide right-hander, and the final corner exit onto the straight, the difference was minimal. It made me proud to know that at some points, I did actually drive this car to its limit. Once we parked up and I met back up with my friend, we just looked at each other with poop in our pants and smiles on our faces. It was an absolutely incredible experience and I highly recommend it. The track is purpose-built for these cars and you can really experience what a Porsche is capable of in a controlled environment. After we got done, we headed up to the cafe to enjoy a few adult beverages, absolutely geek out to each other, and watch some ride-along laps where the coaches drive people. Soon, all the 911s were back in their parking spots, and we were pretty much the last 2 people there. Back in the lobby, we drooled over the 918 for another 20 minutes, and slowly backed out of the door looking at the 918 as long as possible before we had to say our goodbye. If you're thinking of signing up for this experience, or just hearing about it for the first time, I highly recommend it. I do recommend getting there at least an hour before your drive time to check out the facility. If you're a complete freak like me and my buddy, then do what we did and go about 2.5 hours before your time. Spending time to really take in the cars in this facility, watch people drive on both tracks from the overlook, and enjoy some food before you drive was a great call. I think we might go back and drive the GT3s because it was just too much fun to drive these on a track purpose-built to show off what a Porsche can do. My experience was an absolute 10 out of 10, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.